DD India's Shubhendu Ghosh joins us on the story now. Shubhendu, nearly 2 years of Israel's war on Hamas in Gaza. Do we see any end to this crisis?
Hello, Tanvi. The simple answer is no, far from it. The developments in Gaza and West Asia appear to be increasingly convoluted, complex, and if it can be put simply, a humanitarian disaster of a proportion that one may not have seen for long. What appeared like a contest, a conflict between Israel and Hamas now looks like a conflict where there are very easy victims to identify. On the one hand, there are, of course, the Israeli hostages, many of whom have died in Gaza. On the other hand, there are innumerable Palestinian victims, the civilians, children who have perished, and there is also no official count of how many have gone. Meanwhile, there is no real effort, it appears, to bring about a ceasefire, a real ceasefire, and bring an end to the suffering of the real victims of this conflict. We see a UN Security Council vote defeated merely on the context of language that is used to point out Hamas's role in this conflict. Earlier, we see a possibility of a fragile negotiated peace that the region was working towards in Doha, in Qatar. And there we saw that Israel bombed Doha, trying to target the Hamas operatives, not being successful at that. But what it did was to problematize the situation even further. Instead of the conflict moving towards some kind of resolution, we see, in fact, a direction where the former allies, the mediators, are now, in fact, joining the ranks of the adversary. We see the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, after the attack in Qatar, in fact, coming together to voice their opposition and condemnation of Israeli excess and action in Qatar. And one of the steps that they took is, in fact, a greater militarization and a joint defense pact, which is only going to throw the region into a further fragile situation.
The United States has repeatedly shielded its ally Israel from diplomatic pressure at the UN. Now, with the recent veto for the UNSC Gaza ceasefire call, does it isolate both Washington and Tel Aviv globally?
It does, Tanvi, most certainly, but at what cost? America continues to support its closest ally in the region, Israel, in all circumstances, whether we talk about the immediate UNSC vote where America vetoed in favor of Israel, standing against all the other UNSC members. Earlier, we also saw the situation and development in Qatar. Qatar happens to be one of the key non-NATO allies of the United States. But even in the circumstances where President Donald Trump did sort of convey some half-hearted criticism of Israeli action, it was all whitewashed eventually after the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, visited, saying that America stands completely in solidarity with Israel and Israeli action. In fact, isolating its key allies like Qatar and others in the region to an extent that they, in fact, these countries are coming together to form a pact of their own to be able to defend themselves against Israel. So what the world recognized as the October 2023 terrorist attack of Hamas in Israel, and Israel being the victim and its right to defend itself, in the past couple of years, it has become increasingly evident the excesses by the Israeli military in Palestine has become more and more evident. The UN-GA vote that happened last week, where India and 142 other countries, in fact, clearly pressed for immediate peace and ceasefire, isolating Hamas, and also a two-state solution, none of which appear to sort of make any sort of headway as far as Israel or United States is concerned. So in that sense, we see the region clearly divided into two parts. On the one side, US and Israel. On the other side, most of the world.
True. Okay, you mentioned of the UNGA. So next week, the focus will shift to the annual United Nations General Assembly Summit, where, of course, this issue is likely to dominate discussions. So what can we expect?
Most certainly, Tanvi. In fact, what we saw, the UNGA vote that I mentioned about earlier, in which overwhelmingly 142 countries out of 193 voted in favor of an immediate peace ceasefire in Gaza and push for a two-state solution. And then this UNSC vote happens, which sort of puts roadblocks to a possible ceasefire. Now, when the leaders of these countries arrive in New York to participate in the UNGA meet, one person would be missing, and that would be problematic. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian region, is going to be missing because he hasn't been allowed to enter the US. He hasn't got a US visa. We know that increasing number of countries are now willing to recognize Palestine, countries which earlier did not take that step. In fact, these happen to be American allies, from France to the UK to Canada and other nations. So those developments are something which will be in focus, but only resolutions may not help. These countries would also have to put their weight behind bringing that peace and also reining in the excesses by Israel.
Okay, thank you very much for explaining to us the crisis, how it stands at the moment. Thank you very much, Shubhendu Ghosh, for reporting on the story.